The martial arts expert looked at Sammy Davis Jr. on the movie set and said she could take him down in 3 seconds. The crew laughed until she actually threw him to the ground. Then Sammy said 4 words that left everyone speechless. "Teach me that move." It was June 18, 1970, on Stage 12 at Paramount Studios in Hollywood, and the set of the Cannonball Run was buzzing with the kind of organized chaos that only a big-budget action movie could create. Sammy Davis Jr. wasn't starring in the film, but he'd been invited by his friend Burt Reynolds to make a cameo appearance as a favor, and to add some star power to what was already shaping up to be an ensemble comedy. The scene being filmed that day involved a complex fight sequence in a Las Vegas casino, which meant the set was crawling with stunt performers, choreographers, and safety coordinators. It was the kind of controlled mayhem that Sammy found fascinating. Organized violence that looked real but was carefully planned to avoid anyone getting hurt. Sammy had arrived that morning in his usual style, impeccably dressed, despite the casual nature of his small role. Even for a one-day cameo, he treated every professional appearance with the same respect he'd give to opening night at the Copa Room. The cast and crew had welcomed him warmly, and he'd spent the morning chatting with actors, sharing stories, and generally bringing the kind of positive energy that made everyone want to work a little harder. That's when he met Catherine "Cat" Morrison, and everything changed. Cat was the film's new stunt coordinator, a 28-year-old martial arts expert who had been brought in specifically to choreograph the casino fight scene. At 5'4" and 125 pounds, she didn't look like what most people expected from someone in her position, which was exactly why she'd fought so hard to get there. In 1970, female stunt coordinators were virtually non-existent in Hollywood, and Cat had had to prove herself twice as hard as any man just to be in the room. She'd been a competitive judo champion since she was 16, had trained in multiple martial arts disciplines, and had worked her way up from background stunt work to coordination through pure skill and determination. But despite her credentials, she still faced constant skepticism from crew members who assumed she'd been hired as some kind of diversity gesture rather than on merit. The morning had been particularly frustrating. The male stunt performers had been subtly undermining her directions. The director had questioned several of her choreography choices, and more than one crew member had made comments about whether a little girl could really handle coordinating fight scenes with grown men. Sammy noticed the tension immediately. He'd spent his entire career reading rooms, understanding dynamics, and recognizing when someone was being treated unfairly. As he watched Cat work, he could see that she knew exactly what she was doing, but he could also see that the male crew members weren't giving her the respect she deserved. During a break in filming, Sammy approached Cat, who was reviewing fight choreography notes near the craft services table. "You know," Sammy said conversationally, "I've been watching you work, and I have to say, I'm impressed. That sequence you choreographed for the poker table scene was brilliant." Cat looked up, surprised. In her experience, visiting celebrities rarely paid attention to the technical crew, let alone offered compliments on their work. "Thank you, Mr. Davis. That means a lot coming from someone with your experience. Please, call me Sammy. And I'm curious, I've done a little martial arts training over the years for some of my stage shows, but nothing serious. What you're doing looks incredibly sophisticated." It was true. Sammy had worked with martial arts trainers in the past to add some physical elements to his performances, but his knowledge was limited to basic moves that looked good under stage lights. Before Cat could respond, Tony Marcelli, one of the lead stunt performers, approached their conversation. Tony was old-school Hollywood, a veteran of dozens of westerns and action films who had very definite ideas about how things should work on a movie set. "Hey Sammy," Tony said, deliberately ignoring Cat, "you don't need to worry about any of this fight stuff. We'll handle all the real action. The little lady here is just supposed to make sure nobody gets sued if someone gets a bruise." Cat's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She'd learned that responding to comments like that usually made things worse. Sammy, however, had heard enough. "Actually, Tony, I was just admiring Cat's expertise. From what I can see, she knows more about this stuff than most people on this set." Tony laughed dismissively. "Come on, Sammy, look at her. She's maybe 120 pounds soaking wet. What's she gonna do? Choreograph a dance fight?" That's when Cat had had enough. She'd been dealing with attitudes like Tony's all morning, and something about his condescending tone pushed her past her limit of professional patience. "You know what, Tony?" Kat said, standing up and facing him directly. "You're right, I am small, but I bet I could take down anyone on this set in under 3 seconds, including you." Tony burst out laughing. "Are you serious? Sweetheart, I've been doing stunts since before you were born." "I'm completely serious," Kat replied. "Pick anyone. Anyone on this set. I'll demonstrate." By now, their conversation had attracted attention from other crew members, and a small crowd was beginning to gather around them. Sammy could see that Kat was putting herself in a vulnerable position. If she failed to back up her claim, it would only reinforce the skepticism she was facing. Tony looked around the gathering crowd and spotted an opportunity to make his point. "All right, little lady, how about our friend Sammy here? He's a celebrity. He's got some martial arts experience, like he just told us, and he's certainly tougher than most people give him credit for. Think you can take down Sammy Davis Jr. in 3 seconds?" Sammy suddenly found himself at the center of a confrontation he hadn't expected. He looked at Kat, who was now clearly regretting the situation she'd created, but was too committed to back down. "I don't want to put you in an awkward position, Sammy," Kat said quietly. This was between me and Tony, but Sammy could see what was really happening here. This wasn't just about martial arts demonstrations or professional respect. This was about a young woman trying to establish her credibility in an industry that was determined to undermine her at every turn. And if he walked away now, he'd be confirming every doubt that Tony and others had about her abilities. "You know what?" Sammy said, taking off his jacket and handing it to a nearby crew member. "I think this sounds like fun. Let's see what you've got, Kat." The crowd of crew members grew larger as word spread that Sammy Davis Jr. was about to be taken down by the female stunt coordinator. Some were genuinely curious about Kat's skills, while others were clearly expecting to see her fail spectacularly. Kat looked at Sammy with a mixture of gratitude and concern. "Are you sure about this? I don't want to hurt you." "Honey," Sammy replied with a grin. "I've been thrown around by bigger people than you. Show these guys what you can do." What happened next took exactly 2.5 seconds. Kat approached Sammy calmly, as if she were simply going to shake his hand. Sammy, expecting some kind of dramatic martial arts display, was completely unprepared for the sudden fluid motion that followed. Kat grabbed Sammy's right wrist with her left hand, stepped forward with her right foot, and executed a perfect judo hip throw that sent Sammy flying through the air and landing flat on his back on the padded mat that had been set up for stunt rehearsals. The entire sequence was so smooth and effortless that for a moment, the watching crew members weren't sure what they'd just seen. 1 second Sammy was standing there smiling, and the next second, he was lying on the ground looking up at the ceiling. The silence that followed was complete. Tony's mouth was hanging open. The other stunt performers were staring at Kat with new respect. Even the director had stopped what he was doing to see what the commotion was about. Kat stood over Sammy, suddenly realizing what she'd just done. She'd thrown Sammy Davis Jr., one of the most beloved entertainers in the world, to the ground in front of a crowd of his peers. Her face went pale as she considered the potential consequences. "Oh my God, Sammy, I'm so sorry. Are you hurt? I didn't mean to throw you so hard, I just..." That's when Sammy said the 4 words that nobody expected. "Teach me that move." He said it with such genuine enthusiasm and admiration that Kat stopped apologizing mid-sentence. He wasn't angry, he wasn't embarrassed, he wasn't trying to save face. He was genuinely impressed by what she'd just done, and he wanted to learn from her. The crew members who had been expecting Sammy to be humiliated instead watched him spring to his feet with a huge smile on his face. "That was incredible," Sammy continued. "I've never seen anything so smooth. How did you do that? It felt like I was flying." Kat's relief was immediate and visible. "It's called a hip throw. The key is using your opponent's momentum against them. When you expected me to pull, I pushed. When you tried to resist the push, I used that resistance to complete the throw." "Show me again," Sammy said, taking position in front of her. "But this time, walk me through it step by step." For the next 20 minutes, Sammy Davis Jr. received an impromptu martial arts lesson from Kat Morrison while a crowd of increasingly impressed crew members watched. She taught him the basic principles of leverage, momentum, and balance that made her techniques so effective. Sammy proved to be a surprisingly quick student, grasping the concepts quickly and asking intelligent questions about application and theory. The most important thing, Kat explained as she demonstrated a defensive move, is that it's not about being strong, it's about being smart. Understanding physics and using your opponent's energy against them. That's like performing, Sammy said thoughtfully. You don't fight the audience's energy, you redirect it, channel it, make it work for you, instead of against you. Kat nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. That's a perfect analogy. As the lesson continued, something interesting happened. The crew members who had been skeptical of Kat's abilities began asking questions of their own. They wanted to understand the techniques she was demonstrating, the principles behind the movements, the science of what made her so effective despite her size. Tony Marcelli, who had started the whole confrontation, was the last to approach, but eventually even he had to admit what he was seeing. I gotta say, Kat, I was wrong about you. That stuff you're doing, it's not just impressive, it's smart. I've been doing stunts for 20 years, and I've never seen anybody explain the mechanics like that. By the time they returned to filming, the entire dynamic on the set had changed. Kat's authority as stunt coordinator was no longer questioned, and her choreography suggestions were listened to with genuine respect. The fight sequences filmed that day were some of the best in the movie, and several of the male stunt performers asked if she'd be willing to give them private lessons. But the most significant change was in Kat's own confidence. Sammy's willingness to be vulnerable, to be thrown to the ground in front of a crowd, and respond with curiosity rather than ego, had given her something she'd been lacking. The knowledge that her skills were genuinely impressive to people whose opinions mattered. You know what you did back there? Kat asked Sammy during a quiet moment later that day. I got thrown to the ground by an expert, Sammy replied with a grin. You did more than that. You could have been embarrassed, or angry, or defensive. Instead, you made it about learning. You turned what could have been my humiliation into my validation. Sammy looked at her seriously. Kat, talent is talent. I've spent my whole career around talented people, and I've learned that the worst thing you can do is let your ego get in the way of recognizing excellence. What you did today was excellent. Years later, Kat Morrison would go on to become one of Hollywood's most respected stunt coordinators, working on major action films and mentoring a new generation of performers. She would always credit that day on the Cannonball Run set as the turning point in her career. Not because she proved she could throw a celebrity to the ground, but because a legend responded to that demonstration with the kind of grace and humility that showed everyone else how to treat her with respect. And Sammy? He incorporated some of Kat's martial arts principles into his stage shows, using the concepts of momentum and redirection to enhance his physical comedy routines. But more importantly, he'd once again demonstrated that true class isn't about never falling down, it's about how you respond when you do. If this incredible story of humility, respect, and the power of recognizing talent inspired you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to remember that the best response to being outclassed is to ask to be taught. Have you ever had someone surprise you with skills you didn't expect? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing stories about legends who knew that learning never stops, no matter how successful you become.